During the pandemic period, what we were to a degree inoculated against was free will. What it appears increasingly took place during that period was the piloting of measures of control and centralized authoritarianism. Let's have a look at a WEF panel. Again, these are one of those things where I think they inadvertently admit things that they would rather remain covert. Like, the pandemic made people more compliant and more pliable. Let's have a look at this important clip. It's astonishing.
Many of our payments are digital. The truth is, I said that we're in a hybrid model. There's less and less use of cash. From predominantly digital with a little physical. I think the transition to fully digital is not going to be a stretch. People are used to it, people are engaged in it, and circumstances did help. Is adoption rates increased because of COVID. Yeah. This is where contactless started to become something of a necessity, something of a safety, something of a requirement. And because of that, there is very little resistance. Trust is already there.
There's not that much trust. Now, try to, if you can, correlate this information with a narrative that's now clear, overt, and easily observable, like vaccine efficacy, vaccine injuries, the censorship of the use of the word ivermectin, a CNN anchor going from participating in propagandizing to recognizing the situation they've been in.
Ivermectin, a dewormer, really?
Yeah.
They need to be called out and shamed, brother.
I am taking a regular dose of ivermectin. Ivermectin was a boogeyman early on in COVID.
You couldn't talk about it.
That was wrong.
Now apply that to, I wonder if there was any intention or certainly welcome benefit to creating a cashless society. Let's hold that thought in our mind. Let us consider too the potential for the gathering of biometric data. Let us consider too the pushing of what was known then as vaccine passports. But you can bet these ideas haven't disappeared fully off of the menu yet. That many of the suggestions that were made, whether that was the suggestion that you carry a passport or you get medicated or you accept lockdowns or you stay in your home, many of those suggestions we will see again because the WHO treaty, while the UK may have rejected it, is still on the table. And what it facilitates is the ability to address and oppose and shut down the problems they faced last time.
In a way that makes sure that we safeguard the risks. Cybersecurity risk is a must, and it needs to be dealt with at the national level. And to counter cybersecurity risk, you need to continue to invest, you need to continue to collaborate, and you need to continue to train. With those three things, we've done it in the past. I think we should be able to manage these risks.
The biggest challenge a global CBDC might present is the ability for total civilian management, that you and me and our finances will be accessible by a centralized authoritarian force. You already recall the stories of the truckers having their bank accounts frozen, and even people that donated to the trucker cause in Canada. You may be aware of the story that in Ukraine, people that resisted the draft to fight in an unwinnable globalist war had their bank accounts frozen. That's why control over your finances and the combination of your digital identity and your finances is not a good thing. And yet you might imagine for a moment it was if you listen to this woman.
We are to be successful. CBDCs could not be fragmented national propositions. To have transactions more efficient and fairer, we need systems that connect countries. In other words, we need interoperability. And for this reason, at the IMF, we are working hard on the concept of a global CBDC platform.
Let's have a look at the relationship between the IMF and the Ukraine. The IMF is funded by and represents Western financial capital and government and has been at the forefront of efforts to reshape economies around the world for decades, often with disastrous results. The civil war in Yemen and the coup in Bolivia both followed a rejection of IMF terms. So it seems that the IMF have some considerable influence and power. In Ukraine, the IMF had long planned to implement a series of economic reforms to make the country more attractive to investors. US aid provided $15 billion of financial support when it comes to Ukraine setting up a nationwide system of CBDC financial control. Whilst it's not a full digital currency, it is the conflation of every Ukrainian's identity with their financial details, granting them the ability to shut down individual Ukrainian citizens' ability to transact. Now, that would be terrifying enough, but let me give you an additional detail. Guess who's paying for it? You are. It came from your tax dollars. It's all wrapped up in the aid that's given to Ukraine. Brilliant.
One of the things that Congress has given U.S. aid since this full-scale invasion began is an unprecedented amount of money in direct budget support, which sounds kind of obvious. Of course, we would do that. We want to stand with Ukraine, but...
Got to stand with Ukraine. Remember the catchphrase, stand with Ukraine. That's what we're doing. We're standing with Ukraine. We're not setting up BlackRock. We're certainly not doing that. We're not facilitating tech giants getting access to vast swathes of information. We're certainly not piloting tyrannical schemes for technological dictatorships that we'll be bringing to a country like you any day now.
It's totally unprecedented, this kind of scale of investment, and we're talking along the lines of about $15 billion in a sense, cash to the Ukrainian government, which was famously corrupt, in past years.
Excuse me, I've got a question. Is it a good idea to give $15 billion of US taxpayer money to a government that you've just acknowledged is corrupt? Anyone else? Has anyone else got a question?
And still has work, as you noted, to do on corruption today. I don't know if we could have gotten that money out of Congress if not for DIA.
Amazing. They found ways of bypassing Congress. Do you see the ways that Congress is willing to pass law after law that facilitates further centralized authoritarianism, facilitates further and further wars, facilitates more and more censorship? And if they don't do that, there's convenient ways of bypassing it too.
Because what DIA allows us to do is that direct budget support goes, yes, to the Ukrainian government, but then it goes to pay teachers.
That's good news, because this is for the people. We're doing all of this for the people.
To pay healthcare workers, to pay first responders. And there's a digital trail. It's not, some official deciding this or that. It actually is going directly into the bank accounts in a manner that just, it would have been untraceable in a prior regime.
Now, we had a conversation yesterday with Mike Benz. Mike Benz articulately explains how DIA intersects with the power of Google, how agencies and corporate entities that have favorable relationships with the covert processes by which, for example, the 2014 Ukrainian maiden coup were undertaken, are able to facilitate incredibly advantageous deals for their various partners. Let's have a look at how DIA operate and how they've managed to get themselves in such a powerful position. DIA is the groundbreaking and award-winning mobile application that connects 90 million Ukrainians. This is from USAID, which receives taxpayer money, but actually does in public what the CIA does in private. That's what USAID is. What you're reading now is actual propaganda, okay? This is a propagandist agency. Launched in 2020, the DIA app allows Ukrainian citizens to use digital documents on their smartphones instead of physical ones for identification and sharing purposes. The DIA portal allows access to over 50 government services. Now, this is how they sell it to you, but of course, those 50 government services have now got access to all of your information. It was built in partnership with the USA and is poised to be shared with other countries. On the sidelines of the 2023 World Economic Forum in Davos, USAID Administrator Samantha Power said the US hopes to replicate the success of DIA in other countries. You better believe it will be replicating their success in other countries. It will be a country near you, possibly one that you live in. As political turmoil engulfed Ukraine in the lead up to 2014, the US was fueling anti-government sentiment through mechanisms like USAID and National Endowment for Democracy, just as they'd done in 2004. The Washington Post's David Ignatius once wrote that the organization functions by doing in public what the CIA used to do in private. Here's Bobby Kennedy criticizing it at considerable length. What I suppose we are beginning to understand is the way that these agencies intersect and interlock in order to implement power that would be obviously rejected if it was ever able to pass through something as clumsy, as overt and accessible as democracy. This is an interesting moment. This is Robert Malone, remember him, a rare and valuable truth teller during the pandemic period, on Alex Jones's show. Watch out for Alex Jones's summary here. I mean, this guy's still got it. It's pretty incredible.
These identity passports and the social credit system, through the central bank digital currency. All of this is being rolled out simultaneously in a concerted effort to control the ability and willingness of people to act as sovereign beings, to act independently.
Kenny Rogers of the Revolution, come to us. Come to us, Robert Malone. Bring us your sweet freedom. That's pretty astonishing, isn't it? Because one of the things I've heard you say, when you realise that the vaccine wasn't brought in for the pandemic, but the pandemic was brought in for the vaccine, you know, those things, what you start to realise is that the pandemic period augured an incredible amount of power. It legitimised an awful lot of centralised authoritarianism. It created an incredible wealth transfer. It generated some extraordinary opportunities to do things that were absolutely unfeasible and unthinkable before. CBDCs, particularly operating at a global level and looking at the number of pilot schemes across the world, that's plainly part of the plan, facilitate a power that Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, Stalin, all of those people could only dream of. Indeed, we are continually invited to believe that the threat that we face is the threat of the despot, the dictator, the madman, the military leader. But what's plain is what's being implemented slowly, invisibly, always for your protection and safety, is a Kafkaesque, Huxley-esque, Orwellian nightmare where you will have no power, where you will have nothing and you will be happy, where all of your values, all of your connections are being severed, so that ultimately the decisions in your life are made for you by globalist superpowers, by invisible bureaucratic entities, and occasionally visible figures like dear beloved Bill Gates putting his head above the parapet. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and the chat? Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.